Alright guys, welcome to video number 2. This is going to be kind of a continuation of my last video. So we're going to talk about how to find the right strings for any guitar or bass for any tuning using a tension calculator. So I'm going to walk you through what I'm thinking about when I'm building a string set and how to apply some of this stuff that we talked about in the last video to save you some money so that you can buy the right pack of strings every time. If you want to know more about scale lengths or tunings or strings and how they relate in a lot of detail to string tension, go back and watch this previous video before you jump into this one. First thing, what's good to start with is just a regular 6-string guitar and what traditional string packs tend to look like. So I have stringtensioncalculator.com pulled up, and this is probably one of the more common packs that you're going to find like at Guitar Center or your like local music supply store. And if we look pretty carefully here on the low string, we're sitting at about 17 pounds of tension, then up to 19 for the A string, kind of in between for the D string, 16.5 on the G, down to 15 on the B string, and then back up to 16 on the high E. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I've definitely seen worse string packs, but this kind of seems like the norm for normal packs. The tension for each string tends to kind of be all over the place. And if you build a custom set, you can have a much more consistent feel across all your strings, or maybe a progression of tension, and we'll kind of dig into that here in a minute. But in any case, it seems to me like you would want your strings to behave similarly across the fretboard, and your common string packs don't tend to be good for that. So before you jump into a tension calculator, you really want to know how much tension you like, and we dive into a couple of different methods in my previous video. Method 1, putting new strings on a guitar and finding the right amount of tension for each string without worrying about the pitch, right? You just tune up each string until it feels good to riff on, and then you kind of write your results down and build a string pack with those tensions. We're not going to go about that method today. Instead, we're going to use method 2, where I take a guitar and a bass that I own, that I like, and we apply that same amount of tension and the same kind of strategy, whether that's progressive tension or balanced tension, across the entire string set. And we're going to apply that to some different setups so that you can see how to apply this stuff with a tension calculator. So to kick things off, we're going to start with this Maslow 7-string. It's a 30-inch scale guitar, and I have it in drop D sharp or drop E flat, whichever you prefer. So this is the string set that I have on my 30-inch 7-string. See, I've got about 17 pounds on the low string, and then just over 16, 15.5, 16, 16, and then on these plain strings down here, I'm down to 14, and then about 13.5. So, like we talked about in that previous video, plain strings tend to feel a little bit stiffer. So, if we were to keep this right around 16 pounds for the plain strings too, the plain strings will feel tighter than that. So if you come down by 2, 3, maybe 4 pounds, those strings will bend a little bit easier, and they'll kind of feel balanced compared to all the wound strings. Now, you see I have a plain 20 here, because if it's wound, it'll have this little W. Ideally, I would have come down a little bit on this as well. I probably could have got away with a 19, and that string would bend a little bit better. But that's pretty minor. I think you get the idea here that I personally like to be around 16 pounds of tension. And so that makes my planes around 14 or 13. So we're going to keep this balanced tension in mind and try to build a couple of other string sets. Refresh the page here. And then let's say we want to build an 8-string. With 26.5 to 28-inch scale. It's a pretty popular multi-scale, and I definitely wanted to cover at least one multi-scale option. And let's say we're going to do drop E. Let's see. Now, I know I like to be around 16, 17 pounds, right? So let's C, we've got a good option here with the 79. We're just going to get everything kind of close here. And then, see, we're into plain strings already. We could run a wound, or we could, do we want 4 plain strings is really the question. I prefer wounds, especially for metal, because the windings tend to be a little scratchier sounding. So if I can get away with wounds, I will. Let's see. The next wound comes up to 17. Let's stay right about there. And then we'll come down to 14 on these. That looks pretty good. And that's quite a bit. It's a full pound higher. So I'd probably go with something like this. Something like an 80 to a 9 set. Callium's got a lot of in-between sizes, which is nice. And usually if there's a size that you want and you can't find it, you can usually find it through D'Addario. So you have lots of options. That's why I like using this tension calculator. Having access to Callium and D'Addario is nice. But this should basically give me the same kind of feel that I have on my 30-inch 7-string, but on an 8-string with a different scale length. This guitar should play fairly similarly. And then let's go get a little crazy here. Let's do maybe a C-sharp standard 9-string with, let's say, a 29-inch scale. Got some 29-inch scale guitars out there. I don't know about 9 strings, but just something a little bit different here. So let's come back down. The scale length is longer now across the whole board, and you could tell that all of my tensions came up. So let's get things back down to where I like them, right around 16-ish. Try that. And then we'll bring our planes down to like 14-ish. That's pretty fair. Now, one thing to note is once you get to about a 90 gauge string, most companies right around a 90 have to add another winding around the string, and it will make that one string sound quite a bit duller. So a couple options here are we could go down to an 86 or maybe even an 82 and try to maintain a little bit more of a guitar sound with our strings. Or if the tension is more important to us, we could come up a little bit and go to maybe a 94, have a little bit of extra tension on that string, so it's a little less floppy. I would probably just stay around the 90 and just go middle of the road here. I don't particularly mind large strings on guitar. I've gone up to about a 100-ish on my 8 strings, so that's not bad for me. I would probably be fine with this. Then getting away with a 90 in C-sharp 1 tuning is pretty good anyway. So hopefully that makes sense, how to get balanced tension on a guitar, keeping in mind you want your plain strings a little bit lighter. If you cross that threshold of about a 90 gauge, you may want to consider either using a lighter gauge and dealing with the string being a little floppier, or bringing the tension up a little bit more and getting a slightly bigger string so that you have more tension to counteract the string being heavier. Also, one thing to note, one thing that this string tension calculator doesn't have is a total tension for the entire neck. It's worth keeping in mind, especially if you're going to move tunings a lot. Let's say you go from drop C to drop B, or to drop A or something, and you're going to change all of your string gauges. If you can keep the tension on the entire neck the same or really close when you change setups, you won't have to mess with your truss rod nearly as much. So that's one little thing to keep in mind. We're going to move on to bass guitar. All right, so again, I'm going to use my own preference here to start with. So I have the Quake bass. It's got the 40 to 37-inch scale. And what I've been doing lately with this, I've been tuning it to F standard to accompany my guitar. So that's what we've got here, is the 40 to 37-inch scale. And I've got a 184, 136, 98, 70, 51, and we're pushing 49 pounds of tension on the low string and down to 34 on the high string. Now, I personally prefer progressive tension on a bass, which is where the low string gets the most tension, the high string gets the least. And there's a few reasons why. Number one, having a 184 gauge string. Again, you reach that point on bass guitar where you start to approach like a third wrap around the string, and the string sags on the fretboard pretty noticeably once you get over like a 170-ish. And so to counteract that, the string needs to be even tighter, at least if you want it to feel similar to like this 98 up here. Having 49 pounds of tension also keeps that string in check. It keeps it from oscillating as much. There's a little bit less fret buzz than there otherwise would be. So again, these are all things that I know are my own preference. If I was in more of a standard tuning, I wouldn't be nearly up here that 49 pounds. I would probably be closer to like the 35 to 40 range, like the more normal strings on this bass are, right? This D sharp is just one note away from the regular E standard. So that's pretty normal tension there. It's only because I'm deep into the abyss here that I'm going a little bit above and beyond on the tension. It's just to rein in that string sag and to make the palm mutes a little bit more attainable, right? Because we've got quite a fan here. And so it kind of means that your hand needs to be like this to palm mute. And with this string having more tension, it kind of straightens that out a little bit. It makes it more comfortable to play. So on my guitar, it's tuned drop D sharp, right? And I've been going like -4, -5 on the pitch shifter for some of the stuff that I've been writing lately and just jamming on. And -5 is about as far down as I like to go on guitars. So that puts me at drop A sharp. And I'd like to be able to play my bass an octave below for the riffs that need it. So if I wanted to pull that off, which is going to be the next thing that I do, it's going to look something like this. Let's see. Cool. So if I wanted to tune to drop A sharp an octave below my guitars that are already dropped, I'm going to need a 266, which is the biggest string that Calium offers. I have that string, and I'm getting ready to do some experimenting with it, but I do need to get the rest of the set. I thought I had some spares laying around to pull this off with, but it's kind of in between the stuff that I have on hand. So I'm going to order these soon, and I'm going to be making some new videos. I'm going to be going over an entire mix with the Quake bass, where you'll be able to have access to the DI tracks, and then also a mix walkthrough probably several weeks down the road, so that you can get some insight into my process as a mix engineer. But staying on topic here, since I like progressive tension, and this is as much as I can get right now, I'm kind of capped at 45 pounds, and then down to about 35 on the high string. So it's the same philosophy, right? We're staying in that like 50 to 30 pound range on bass. Bass has got a little bit more range to it. You can go a little bit tighter, a little bit looser, but generally bass is twice as tight as guitar is. So that like, you know, that 15 to 20 pounds you're aiming for on your wound strings on the guitar translates to around 40 pounds on the bass. But there's a lot of range for preference there. So again, being on a multi-scale instrument, this is what works for me. So if you like the Quake, if you like learning about how to approach low tunings, I am going to have some more content on that specific topic coming up soon. So if you want to hear more about that stuff, hit the subscribe button, leave me a comment, because it's coming soon. Let's try a 35-inch scale bass, B standard. And again, let's see how this is going to work out. We're already in a good place up here. We come down a little bit there. Oh. It'd be nice if there was something in between that 94 and that 98. We don't need to quite get over 40 pounds. This looks pretty fair. on a 35 inch. And I mean, you really don't need a 136 for B. We could come down to a 130 for sure if we wanted to. And I probably would. Something like this. It's not very progressive, but with the offerings that we have here from Callium, I think this is pretty close to something that I know I would enjoy on a 35-inch scale base. Now again, my previous two builds were over 40 pounds on the lowest string, right? But we're just using a 130 here. It's not going to sag on the fretboard. It's not going to be very dull sounding anyway, so we can lighten up a little bit and get a little bit more expression out of our low strings if we want to do string bends and stuff like that. But still up to 33 on the high strings. I do a lot of bending on guitar, and I like to match that up with bass whenever it's possible. So keeping string bends, especially on the higher strings, accessible on bass is important to me. But if I was just doing down-picking stuff and I didn't really care about expression, I'd probably just go straight across 40 and go for more of a balanced setup. But again, we're keeping with the theme of what do I like and how do I apply it to different tunings, different scale lengths. We'll do a 34-inch, just regular bass here. And again, I think even 40 pounds is overkill on E when you're tuning to E. I don't think it really benefits you a whole lot. Again, my preference. I would probably run something like this, because even 37 pounds of tension is pretty easy to do string bends on. It still kind of keeps with that progressive theme a little bit. It might just be better to go with balanced tension for me. But also there being no plain strings on bass means it's pretty easy. You don't have to worry about those strings being lighter. If you do like balanced tension, just make it balanced across the board. We could do... I think it's pretty close to 40 there. We could do something like this. I would probably like this setup on just a straight 34-inch scale bass with just the standard E. Maybe even down to something like this, because 40 was overkill. This is probably what I would settle with right here. But, you know, hopefully this video is a little bit more straightforward than the last one, and this can help you apply some of these concepts to making string packs. Ultimately, you just need to know this tension value right here. That's all you need. Spend some time with your instrument, put a new pack of strings on it, tune them up a little bit, and riff around without looking at a tuner, right? Just tune the string up. If it feels like it's too light or too tight, make some adjustments, riff on that string, and just set up your entire guitar that way, right? Obviously, the pitch is going to be all over the place, but then you just write down the closest approximations. Maybe you're on your 34-inch scale bass, and you put your low B string on there, and let's say it's you put a 130 on there, and you tune it up, and you start playing around on it, and you go, oh, this feels really good, and you check your tuner and go, oh, I'm tuned to C#1 right now. That's 45 pounds of tension, but that's what feels the best to me. You might actually be a little surprised at what is best for your playstyle, because most people don't experiment this way, right? They just go get a pack of strings, they slap it on the bass, and then they go, I don't like the way this feels, or you just get used to it. And again, there are people who like having a floppy low string because they spent so many years not realizing or not caring that there was an alternative. And if that's you and you've gotten used to it, you should probably continue to buy string packs that are more traditional because you've adapted to it. So all that aside, hopefully this was a little more straightforward and easier to understand. But if you feel like there was something I didn't cover, if there's something else you wanted to learn about that's on topic or off topic, leave a comment, subscribe, shoot me a message on Facebook, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah,